This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault, and today's episode is presented by Aesthetic Magazine. Well, once again, we are covering the Toronto International Film Festival. The 45th anniversary of it just happened, and so I gathered together a group of two viewers who had seen a whole bunch of films, and we have a great conversation about it. They are John Brody and Maria Escribano, and the two of them together saw just about all of the big films that they were able to see. It was a fantastic conversation. I unfortunately wasn't able to see any films this year. The festival severely cut down the amount of press passes being given out due to the nature of the festival, the nature being that because of COVID-19 meant that they were mostly digital screenings. There were some in-person, some drive-in showings, things like that. But yeah, they cut down the amount of press passes handed out because there also were less tickets in general available. There was caps on how many digital tickets could be bought for different films and what have you. But that did not stop me from following along in the news and seeing all the reviews coming in and having major FOMO for not seeing everything I could. That's where John and Maria come in, and I get to live vicariously through them and enjoy the things that they enjoyed, and can't wait to see all the movies that they saw. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with John and Maria.
Yes, Cassius Marcellus Clay is the new heavyweight champion of the world, boy.
Yes, he is.
And I don't even have a scratch on my face. Oh, my goodness.
Cash. Cash?
What?
Cash, what?
Why am I so pretty? And I'm only 22 years old. There is no way I'm supposed to be this great. Look, Alexander the Great conquered the whole world at the age of 30, and I conquered the world of boxing at 22 without sustaining so much as a scratch.
That's right. There he goes.
You do the math.
And now I am joined by John Brody and Maria Escribano. Thank you so much for the both of you joining me. You both saw a ton of TIFF films, and so I'm really excited to hear your opinions on all of this. Of course, you two saw some overlapping movies, so I'm definitely curious to see how the two of you viewed those, but also in going back to the TIFF Preview episode that I put out a couple weeks ago, I made a list of the 10 movies I'm most excited about. There are some that you guys saw, so I'm definitely interested to see how those played out. So without further ado, John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for having me on, Dakota.
I am very happy. This is actually your first TIFF, is it not?
Yes, this is my first TIFF. I, was getting very excited to make the trip out to Toronto, and then with all the coronavirus things that have been happening around the world, it was sad when they canceled it. But I think I definitely wouldn't have attended even if they had, not altered the festival in any way. But I was excited to see that I could still partake digitally, which made it pretty enjoyable. Very different experience, but still pretty enjoyable.
Now, does it make you want to definitely come back in person one time?
Oh, absolutely. I'm holding out hope that this time next year things will be a little bit more calm and under control with regards to COVID-19. But I'm not going to start buying tickets or making hotel reservations quite yet. But I certainly will as soon as it's safe to do so. The experience, it gave me a good sense of what it's like seeing the movies and what it's like trying to watch a lot of movies over a short period of time. But I think I really missed out on the overall environment and excitement that a festival brings with it.
Absolutely. Now, Maria, thank you so much for joining as well. Is this your first TIFF, or had you done it before?
No, and I actually can't recall when I first went. I would say 14 years.
Wow.
Because, the first film I actually went to see was because a coworker couldn't make it. So I got a free ticket. And it was After the Wedding with Mads Mikkelsen.
Oh, this is all going to come back to that.
Exactly. And I cried like a baby, and that was it. I was hooked, and that was it.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's excellent. I'm so glad that we have such a veteran TIFFer here now to talk about that. That's really interesting. Now, this is the first year, obviously, as John, you were saying, due to COVID, all this stuff kind of, I don't know how to say it politely, but went to shit. We had a mostly digital festival. There were some in-person screenings. There were some drive-in screenings. John, I know you're not physically in Toronto. Maria, you are here in Toronto. Did you only do the digital stuff, or did you also do some drive-in or in-person stuff?
I only did one in-person, and it was for Falling.
Okay. And what was like the audience like? Was it mostly empty? How were the safety precautions?
It was at the Lightbox, and it was Theater 2. No, John, Theater 2 is about 300 seater, but because of Toronto regulations or guidelines, it was limited to 50 patrons. So it felt empty, and they did block off all the seats. So quite anything with a white covering is one that has been reserved, but it felt very empty. It was fine when the lights are down and you're watching the film, but they did have a bit of a Q&A at the back, at the tail end of the film, and of course the intro, and it just didn't feel like a festival, right? It just felt like you're in a regular theater during a regular day.
Sorry, I'm just curious, did they accommodate kind of group seating, or was it kind of one-on-one, like you had to sit on your own?
What they had done was, when you were purchasing tickets for in theater, was they actually had blocked off seats already. You could either buy them singles or pairs. If by chance, when you had logged on, they only had pairs available, you have to buy the pair. Whether you have a friend or not, too bad, so sad, you have to buy the pair. It's literally, they blocked off the specific seats. I think you have the row in front of you pretty much empty as well. It on your own, it felt like there was nobody there, right? It was surreal.
Wow, that's crazy. So that's definitely fascinating. As I kind of mentioned, I didn't have a press pass this year. Last year I did. This year I didn't. They significantly cut down the amount of press coverage. And even though they were doing digital screenings, they still wanted less. Apparently that was due to the different distributors and film production companies that wanted less people watching it. I'm still not really completely satisfied with all of this. As far as the digital screening access and being able to buy tickets, did you encounter any problems, John?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the first problem or qualm I had with how they had this festival set up was that limited number of tickets for some of the films. And it didn't really seem consistent, or maybe that was just a factor of reduced demand for other films. But it seemed like the films that had the highest demand were sold out before even, most people were able to purchase tickets for them. So I know there were one or two films I would have liked to see that when it was my turn or the window came up to purchase digital tickets, they were sold out. And so, I would have liked to see that. And then also the ticketing system was a little clunky. It felt like, I would have expected, I mean, I guess it's hard to say, right? This is their first time doing it digitally. And they were using Ticketmaster. They were using kind of the official account manager Ticketmaster site. But it just didn't feel like it was set up or fully tested to handle the sort of traffic that they received. I know when I was purchasing tickets the day they went on sale, my cart was emptied, halfway through. And so I had to go through the whole process again. And I saw a lot of people online, complaining, saying that they got cut off or that the window expired before they had a chance to purchase their tickets. And so fortunately, I was able to get tickets to all the films that I wanted to see, after I had seen which ones had been sold out. I would have been sad if one had sold out while I was trying to purchase them, but fortunately that didn't happen. So apart from those two complaints, I would say it was relatively smooth and pretty easy.
What about you, Maria? Did you have any pros and cons of the way the festival set up this year?
Firstly, about ticketing issues, it's almost not TIFF if you don't encounter a ticketing issue, because you always expect it. There's always going to be a problem. Now, I do have a bit of line of sight as to why they always have issues. I had participated in a forum a few years back that spoke to that, and that was one of the pressing matters for them, is making that ordering process much more seamless. Their challenge is, despite the fact they're using Ticketmaster, is it's the type of sale they're managing. On a typical year, you're talking 300 films, multiple screenings, all of them being available all at once. So it was just a matter of volume, right? That the system itself, despite the fact that it's a big Ticketmaster engine, it's just not built that way. Because usually people argue about, well, other concerts can manage it. Yeah, other concerts, but that's one, probably 3 nights, and that's it. Theirs is, let's say another round. That's probably four screenings, different locations, different number of tickets per. So it's just, anyway, as I said, going back to that. As far as issues in getting tickets, over the years, I've become a member, which I found makes it a little easier because you have a little advance opportunity to get tickets in. But to John's point, 2 specific screenings were unavailable right at the outset, and that was Ammonite and Bruised. As far as I've heard, they were pretty much gone, even the top level of patrons. So, and that's part of, I think, the distribution agreement or contract negotiations on that front. So they were very limited. So knowing that, I already kind of crossed that off my list and moved on. Right? But didn't have much difficulty. And generally, they do open up the more popular shows. They do provide additional screenings, which happen to falling in another round, if I'm not mistaken, and Nomadland for that matter.
I know Ammonite. I had read they only had 2,000 tickets available for the digital screening of it. So I think that's why it was pretty much unavailable even to members like yourself. I will say I think it's definitely a great idea, and something that they've been doing for previous festivals is having that kind of tiered ticketing system, right? So press on Monday maybe, and then members or Golden Circle members on Tuesday, members on Wednesday, and then general public. By the time it gets to general public, it should try and alleviate any of that stress that the ticketing system may encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess without further ado, let's talk about some of the movies that you guys saw. I'm very excited. You both sent me gigantic list of the movies that you saw. In fact, just so that people are aware of just how amazing you are, if you could kind of run down the movies that you saw, Maria, if you want to lead us off, if you have that in front of you.
Sure. It was Shiva Baby, Night of the Kings, The Way I See It, One Night in Miami, Another Round, I Care a Lot, Concrete Cowboy, Quo Vadis Aida, The Father, 76 Days, New Order, The New Corporation, the unfortunately necessary sequel, and Good Joe Bell.
And what about you, John?
Yeah, so because I was primarily or entirely digital, it was kind of dictated by the scheduling, but I did The Way I See It, Gaza Mon Amour, Get the Hell Out, Penguin Bloom, Under the Open Sky, Nomadland, Another Round, Shadow in the Cloud, One Night in Miami, and Concrete Cowboy.
Well, as people have heard, then you had some crossover, so I figured the best place to start is where this crossover is. So I'm going to start with the first one, The Way I See It, just because that wasn't one that made my top 10 list. So I'm very curious. I don't really know a lot about it. What can you tell me about this movie, John?
I know what happens in the Oval Office, and that's what scares me. I come at this from a very unique perspective. Not just having been a journalist, but also having worked for 2 different presidents.
Hey, folks. Hey, smile.
Pete was with the president all the time.
Unlike his predecessor, Mr. Trump does not allow his staff photographer to capture photographs of life and work inside the White House.
If you just stacked up the images of the Obama presidency and the Trump presidency, you would see the 2 stories of America in the starkest possible contrast.
Sure. So the way I see it, I would describe as kind of being broken up into 3 parts, right? So it's a political movie. It's produced by MSNBC. and it follows this the presidential photographer of Reagan and Obama. So Pete Souza, who is the official White House photographer. And so I described this movie in three parts because first part is pretty much a documentary about his life and photographing these presidents. And then through doing that and kind of telling us that story, they really go in depth on Obama and his presidency and kind of what he was like as a president and the crises and triumphs that he had when he was in office from 2008 to 2016. And then in the kind of last third of the movie, it kind of goes into Pete, the subject of the film, his transition from this kind of unopinioned photographer, White House professional who, kind of has to set his political leanings aside to now that, Donald Trump has been elected president, how he's kind of changed his views on the world and has become very political and has, created this Instagram account where, he posts these photos with some snarky comments, basically, trying to enlighten the American people as to, one, what a great president Obama was, and then two, kind of how Donald Trump isn't a president. He's not, a Republican or a Democrat. He's just a bad person, period. And trying to, the movie does an excellent job in my mind of contrasting the two and just showing how much you can see of a person and of a president through just the lens of a photographer, right? So most of the movie is just like a slideshow, a Ken Burns slideshow of his pictures. And they are so incredibly powerful. I mean, after watching, I went up and I looked up some of these photos and I just spent, a few minutes looking at each one. And I mean, the photos he's taken of Obama are just remarkable. And you compare these to the official photos that have been released of Trump, and it's like you don't get anything out of them. They're posed. They talk in the movie about how Trump has recreated moments in his presidency just for the sake of this photograph, and that wasn't the case with Obama. He had unprecedented access of Obama during his presidency. I mean, because he was his photographer when he was a senator in the years prior to the election in 2008. And so he was able to capture and form this relationship with Obama that just no other presidential photographer had really done before him. So I guess that's a description of the movie, and I put in some of my opinions there. I don't know if that was what you were looking for.
I appreciate a little bit of the Freudian slip in there. Maria, how did this movie work for you as far as a documentary? Did it accurately capture what John was describing there?
Yes, and I loved it. Totally loved it. I think a little bit backstory. When the schedule first came out for the films, I did a quick read, did my short list, and never looked back. So a lot of the movies, when I watch them, is always a surprise because I don't remember what they were about. For this one, I just assumed it was a bit of a look back, a little walk down memory lane of the Obama history, of the Obama presidency. Didn't quite expect the political bent of the movie, but it was. What I think was good was it provided a lot of context on a lot of the photos he's provided. So there are a lot of popular photos that a lot of us may have recognized, but the documentary kind of spoke to what was happening, what was happening minutes before that, what was potentially Obama hearing, why did he have that look? So it was really, really good insight as to what was happening, and I think it kind of speaks to Pete's kind of thought on being more political now was his comment of, I know what happens in those rooms. And to know that this man is in that room right now and making those decisions, he goes, back to John's point, he's not the right guy. Mm-hmm. So it makes you think of just the access. He must have heard a lot of stuff. And for him, who's not even in the political game, to say that, it was a little scary, yeah. Right? But it was Great documentary. I truly recommend anybody to see it. And back to John's point, just for the photos themselves, if you want to take politics aside, great. If you're big into art, excellent work.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I do a bit of concert photography on the side. And so when I'm, photographing bands, usually afterwards I get out of the photo pin. So I was like, so how was it? I was like, I wasn't even really listening. I was just trying to get the right image and stuff like that. And then sort of I can go back later and reassess how I felt. And that's sort of how I feel listening to you. Peter must have felt while he was photographing Obama, it's just a job. I'm just here to do a job. But then he can go back later and reevaluate everything, especially considering where things are now. And that must truly form his opinion and be quite a moment of revelation for him.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting. I thought the way they structured it, right? It doesn't really become that politically charged until like the last third of the film, right? And I think it's incredibly important that they have that in there and that it is given so much screen time because, we're going into October right now, and for the American people to see a film like this prior to the election, I think is going to be very important. And I think that release timeline is very intentional. So I think this movie, will remain and will continue to be looked on as a great capture of this incredible photographer and of a remarkable president. And I think that kind of, urgency that we need to do something about this issue that is in the later half of the film. You could watch this in 5 years and maybe leave that part out or kind of stop watching, around when that kicks in because it might lose some of its prevalency in later years.
Interesting. Now, not to cut you guys too short, there's 3 movies now that you both saw that ended up making my preview list. They are Nomadland, Another Round, and Concrete Cowboy. Maria, let's start with you. Nomadland. Let's talk about that one a little bit.
Sure. Again, it's one of those where I heard a bit of talk. I think I bought ticket to it the day before it even won Venice. So there was some talk about that, about the film itself. But it was an interesting year in the life of a woman who lived in her van and how she finds a community through that year who kind of shared her lifestyle and thought on life itself. I think it was it wasn't intended that way, but it was the movie of the time, right? I think it resonates because a lot of us, particularly through COVID, the pandemic, lockdown, a lot of us probably were feeling some of the emotion she's showing because she was very isolated in many respects. She lived alone. You learn to be kind of your own entertainment and self-sufficient that way. So I think it's definitely great timing as far as release. I don't think it was intended to be that way, but it definitely resonates.
That's
right? Resonates for now.
Yeah. What about you, John?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. When I chose to see this film, I don't think there was a lot of buzz around it, but I definitely, recognize Frances McDormand. I mean, she's a heavy hitter, and to see a piece like this, I mean, this is essentially a character piece, right? We're following her and on her journey kind of across the United States, and in becoming a nomad, and it's really I think her performance in it was fantastic, but I also think the way it was shot, it was just these incredibly gorgeous landscape shots, just time and time again. And I was every time it was a new landscape, I was just sitting there in awe, being like, gosh, how do you find these shots? Where are they filming these shots that are just gorgeous and absolutely beautiful? So for those 2 reasons, yeah, I was very happy I did get to see this, and I really enjoyed watching it.
And just to add to that, I think this is a film that really is really best seen in the big screen, because just, again, it's cinematography itself, right? I think it would just, mind you, it leaves an impression already, but I can just imagine if you saw this in the big screen, lights down, full house, it would be awe-inspiring. the other thing I was going to mention is, if I'm not mistaken, maybe John could correct me on this one if I'm going the wrong way, but some of the characters that she meets along the way are true nomads who do live that lifestyle. So it added some realism to the story itself. Now, you don't find that out until later on when you look at the credits, but yeah, it was, fantastic film.
Yeah, no, you're definitely correct. And I, the way, sorry, we never talked about this, but the way I was viewing those, not the biggest screen, but I do have a projector set up in my living room. And so all of these I was watching on, I'd say like 100-inch screen, lights off, obviously. However, this might be a good time to talk a little bit about one of the limitations of the streaming platform they use, is that they have these counter piracy measures that they have in place, to prevent people from copying them and uploading them illegally online. And one of those is by shifting some of the colors in all of the films. And it's not really noticeable unless you move your mouse while the stream is going on, but it's pretty much only on whites and blacks, and it shifts the blacks to be more red and it shifts the whites to be more blue. And so it was a really interesting thing we noticed, when we were trying to move the mouse around or pause, the colors were changing. Like, oh, wow, that looks totally different. And by about the fourth or fifth movie, in a dark room when it was like a pretty red tint, we're like, if every room seems to be red for some reason, like have these red lights. And then we put it together, we're like, wait a minute, like that can't be how it's actually filmed.
Interesting. Now, speaking of the fact that you both were highlighting the cinematography, it was done by Joshua James Richards. He did Chloe Zhao's previous movie, The Rider, and also Francis Lee's last movie, God's Own Country, who did Ammonite. And he is working not as a cinematographer, but in the camera department of Chloe Zhao's follow-up, the Marvel movie Eternals. So I do not think this is going to be the last time we are going to be seeing some fantastic images from Joshua James Richards. All right, so the next movie that you both saw was the Mads Mikkelsen Another Round, which was definitely getting a lot of buzz this festival. Maria, what were your thoughts on that film?
I thought it was going to be the dark horse. In many respects, loved it. No, mind you, I have a history with Mads, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of his films through the years through TIFF, so I knew he was going to deliver. I also saw The Hunt, which both of them, which the director and Mads actually had collaborated on before, and loved that film as well. I cried like a baby on that one too. So with this one, I thought it was a very interesting premise, right? The whole idea of it's almost like a social test around alcoholism, right? That there is a certain level where everything is heightened, that you might be slightly inebriated, but you're actually, able to optimize all your faculties and excel. Really, really interesting. Again, not knowing what it was about, because I completely forgot the summary. It was greatly acted. I think what stood out for this one is a lot of the films were good, well executed. This one had an interesting concept to start with, so that's why it's something that spoke to me, shall we say, because it was different. It starts a conversation. I think that's what it is. It's a conversation starter.
Now, it's interesting, John, because this is one of the few movies that actually has a trailer. The trailer sort of starts out fairly lighthearted. It starts out with this concept of how much alcohol can you drink and still perform in your daily life like a functioning alcoholic. But then obviously it starts showing the downside effects as well, where it looks like things get a little bit darker. Is this the case of I don't want to say typical European movie, but the sort of films where you really do get that clash of both lighthearted element and much more darker personal element as well, where it's really blending the comedy and drama together successfully?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I certainly would agree with that. I think it starts off as this kind of, it actually starts off kind of in a sad place a little bit. I mean, your main character, the character played by Mads, is this teacher, I think a high school history teacher who's not really enjoying life. He's not really getting the fullest out of it. And so this experiment kind of starts off as an opportunity for him to try and discover, what it is to live again and be more energized in his day-to-day life. And so it then goes into that sort of lighthearted nature that you were talking about. And what I really liked about the film is it didn't really try and offer some like moral, what is right, what is wrong message at the end of the film. It kind of we saw them kind of go through this experiment, and they took the experiment, as the trailer suggests, to the next level, which has very entertaining results. But it sort of shows that every alcohol, and especially at these levels, affects everyone differently. And it affected the four main characters in different ways, and their response to those changes is really interesting to see play out. But the film doesn't try and force this message down your throat that alcohol is bad, and overusing it and becoming a functioning alcoholic is not a good thing. It's more of just showing you how these characters respond to the changes. And so I really liked that aspect of it. It caught me off guard, like subverted my expectations. I saw the movie going in a certain direction, and it didn't. It just kind of, it just went, and it was really enjoyable to see. It was, this is also, I would agree with Maria. I saw the description of this movie, and I said, I have to see this. it just sounds so absurd, but it just, they executed it perfectly. So I certainly, yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add is it's an interesting insight to the Danish attitude to alcohol, because they'll talk about it, and here are high school kids drinking 30 bottles of beer in a weekend. It was just, and it was a natural topic of conversation in his class. It was, as I said, it was an interesting insight to that attitude, because it's different in North America, right? It's a very different concept in North America as far as alcohol. You can't drink up until 18 or 19, depending on where you are. But there, it seems open and honest. Go ahead, do it on a weekend. It's a game.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think seeing the European perception of it too was great, because I have English family, and they certainly view alcohol in a totally different light. But I think the Danish people, right, the few Danes I know, it's like a whole nother level. It's like it's totally normalized in their culture, and so it was really interesting to see that film come out of Denmark, and it it was acted brilliantly. It was just fantastic performances across the board.
Yeah, as a fan of Thomas Vinterberg and Mads Mikkelsen's last collaboration, The Hunt, that was previously mentioned, I'm definitely very excited about this. Now, the next movie that appeared on my list was Concrete Cowboy, the Idris Elba starring film. John, I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on this. This is one that I really only had a description for. There were some still photos that came out about this, and this sort of urban cowboy has sort of come to light in the last few months, because we've seen Black Americans show up at protests on their horses in these bigger cities like Detroit. So I'm really interested to see how this film actually played out, and sort of showing a slice of life that we, as far as I'm aware, most people don't really know about.
Yeah, no, it certainly, to me at least, the film did a great job of exposing exactly what you were talking about, these urban cowboys that exist in major cities across the United States that most people didn't even know existed, but have been around for more than 100 years, providing an outlet sort of to these individuals to avoid poverty or violence, or it's more of providing them with a safe haven, as these cities experience sort of like gentrification, I would say. And so I think from a story perspective, the movie did a great job of giving us that story and bringing us up to date kind of with that and how it's been going on. I will say I thought the film dragged out a little bit towards the end. It didn't really feel like it didn't feel like it needed to be as long as it was to get across the message that they were trying to share. And I also felt like Idris Elba, who was the star of the film, he was pretty underutilized. The scenes he was in, I think he gave a great performance, but I think they just didn't write that much for him, and it left me kind of wanting more at the end of the film.
Was it more of an ensemble film than a character piece towards about him?
Well, certainly, I mean, for Caleb McLaughlin, who played you may know him from Stranger Things, plays Lucas in Stranger Things. He was sort of the main character of the film. I know all the descriptions online didn't quite capture that, but so he's the main focus, and I think he gives a fine performance. I tend to be a little harsh with child actors, just because they don't have the years of training that adult actors have, and so I feel like every time I see a adequate performance, I'm like, it wasn't very good compared to Idris Elba, this all-star. No, he gave a great performance, but the film did focus more on him than I think I would have preferred.
Are you mixed on this movie too, Maria, or do you feel differently?
I hated it.
Whoa, okay. I love this.
It just didn't work for me.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. Pairing aside the whole idea of the cowboy and to your point, the urban cowboy, it is a very typical story. Here's this troubled child, being sent off pretty much to live with his dad who he barely knows. And then it's this coming of age story and him kind of finding his way, shall we say. It was just, I think you're right. It was dragging. It was slow. And it just didn't work. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it couldn't hold my attention. That's part of the problem. And then what I thought was interesting is similar to Nomadland, some of the characters they have, or secondary characters in the movie, are true cowboys who actually are true urban cowboys. And I thought, sadly, that actually would have been a much more interesting film if they left it as a documentary, right? Instead of trying to overlay it with a story, which I just didn't think worked well. Right. Caleb did a good job for what he was given, but it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it would have functioned a lot better as a documentary. The story basically added nothing, being that it was, a coming of age story that we've seen 1,000 times.
That's sort of interesting. It sort of reminds me a little bit of what you were wishing it would be, more like Chloe Zhao's last movie, The Rider. I don't know if either of you saw that, but it's more focusing on the actual cowboys and how they live their day-to-day life in a modern world, as opposed to what this movie sort of went. All right, and then another film that I believe only John, you saw. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about awards later on, but Gaza, Mon Amour actually won one of the awards. So I'd love to get maybe just some quick thoughts that you have on that.
Sure. Yeah. This was, I think, the second film I saw, and it's interesting. I didn't love it, but I did really enjoy kind of the tone of the film. It was this kind of very dark film, not dark as in tone, but dark as in it was dark pretty much the entire time. But it was this kind of very deadpan humor at times and rom-com at others and drama, and it was just flowing really naturally from genre to genre. And the premise, this man finds a fisherman, finds this statue, one day while fishing, and so that's kind of the B plot, and then the A plot is him trying to find this woman who he's fallen in love with when he passed on the street. That's a very traditional story that we're used to, but it's also set in this incredibly unique world of the Gaza Strip, a world unlike anything else, anything that we experience. So seeing how this traditional, romantic, partial drama, partial comedy plays out, but in that world is very fascinating to see. I enjoyed it. Didn't love it, but I enjoyed the kind of feel I had while watching it.
Interesting. So this won the NetPAC Award, which is the Network for the Promotion of Asian Cinema. So it's definitely interesting to see that that's how it went out. Now, there was a bunch of movies that were on my top 10 most interesting list that, Maria, I believe you saw. Now, John, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you see One Night in Miami or no?
I did. Yep.
Okay, I don't think that was in my email, but then we'll talk about that one first. So that is one that I was very excited about just on the idea alone. Interestingly enough, a few years ago, I actually acted in a play that Steve Martin wrote called Picasso at the La Panagile, and it basically posits this idea of what would happen if Albert Einstein and Pablo Picasso, who both lived in Paris at the exact same time, if they got together to talk about life, philosophy, art, all those sorts of things. And I see the subject line of One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King, and I'm like, this is the exact same thing, and it is so needed right now because it features some fantastic African-American actors playing characters like Muhammad Ali and Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and Joe Brown. And so please tell me, is this as great as I hope it is? Maria?
It was good. It was very good, actually. It felt like a theater production, or it would be good to adapt to a theater. I don't know if it started off that way, but it sure felt it, right? The way that a lot of the conversation really seemed to revolve around the Sam Cooke character and Malcolm X, from my recollection. And part of that was really and a lot of the conversation was about the use of their voice, right? Here we have an opportunity. All of us have a platform. We really need to push a certain agenda forward. So I thought it was a good conversation piece, another good film for the times, because it really raises a lot of questions, particularly around the Black Lives Matter kind of conversations. It was really, it's a thinking man's movie, I think, because it's one of those where you need to let it settle. Like a lot of the conversations that happen, you really need to let it settle. You need to walk away and have a conversation with other folks, because you'll find that, I thought Sam Cooke's character, who says a lot of the advances that we are doing really should be being successful and independent. I don't need to speak for the Black people in many respects. Is my opportunities that I've taken advantage of to be successful is enough. Like that's me kind of moving our cause forward. But Malcolm X was of a different front, obviously. It's more of being more outspoken, getting the word out about our concerns. So as I said, it's a thinking man's movie, not to dissuade people, from seeing it, but I think it's definitely worthwhile to watch in the environment we're in.
I think we've long sort of looked at the debate of how would Martin Luther King and Malcolm X sort of, we know that they definitely had conversations and wrote letters to each other and had philosophical difference while also having philosophical similarities. So it's definitely interesting to sort of have a writer write the characters of what would happen if we can see them having a debate. So I'm really interested and curious to see about that. How did it all play out for you, John?
Yeah, so I'll just add a few things that I had written down right here. One, it was actually this is adapted from a stage play that Kemp Powers did in 2013, and I think I completely agree with you. I mean, it is most of the film is set in this motel room, so it would function incredibly well as a play on stage. And then the other thing I was going to say is, this is like very much like the what if these four incredibly important people at the time, were in a room together, and what would that conversation look like? And I think the interesting thing I was reading about it earlier today was that, these people were friends, at the time in 64, these four were friends and probably had a conversation that looked very similar to the type of conversations we saw in the film. I think this movie, really does a good job of capturing, what it would have looked like to be a fly on the wall for one of those for a night, in Miami, to kind of experience and hear those conversations. So I like the thinking of it as like a what if, but I think it's very plausible that this type of story could have unfolded the way we saw it. I think it's incredibly important right now. This type of film, it could not be more relevant to Americans and to the world. I think, to kind of see what this, because it does a good job of showing what racism looked like in 64. And I think what's very troubling, at least what was very troubling to me while watching it, is it sounds so similar to what people are experiencing today. I mean, the problems. There's a great monologue given by Kingsley Ben-Adir, who plays Malcolm X, where he talks about what Black Americans are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and it goes on. I mean, I was discussing with one of the friends I saw this with how that monologue was probably extended, after the script was written, after everything that has been going on this year, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests, and I think it's incredibly important to do so. I think it was a really powerful scene, and so I mean, I think for that reason alone, this movie was really enjoyable, and it's definitely the thinking man, like Maria, you were saying, is a thinker. The entire time I was just like from start to finish, I was just contemplating all these different situations in my head and trying to go through what people in America have to experience every day, and hearing them talk about the challenges on how they use their voice. You have a very young Muhammad Ali. You have Malcolm X, who's going to be killed a year later, I think it's 65. So and you have Sam Cooke, who's got probably one of the largest voices of them all, and how they can use their voices to try and change the way things are going. It is really, really interesting. And I will also say, I mean, Regina King, I think this was her directorial debut. Fantastic. I think she did a great job of holding the viewer's attention from start to finish. And this is certainly something that I think I could have seen dragged out. I could have seen them added about another hour of dialogue for this type of movie. And I think it was timed really well.
Well, I'm very excited to see this. Now, Maria, there's 3 more movies that you saw that made my list. I just want to get your short reactions. If you have anything positive or negative to say about Falling, The Father, and Good Joe Bell, those are ones I was sort of curious to see how they would play out at this festival.
Sure. I'll start with my favorite of the lot. I love The Father. Right. I almost, it's the top 3, if not the best, that from my list. It was well acted. I mean, it's Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman. You can't go wrong. And I think the other aspect of that is it was a really, really good script. And that I know was based off of a play. And it's very apparent. It goes back to, it's set in, again, a specific apartment. Well acted. There's a lot of not imagery, but a lot of the conversation is about time, right? Because again, the concept of The Father is Olivia Colman taking care of her dad who has dementia. So I thought it was funny because he keeps on losing his watch. So it's about time, right? Mm-hmm. So again, well acted, well executed. I think it's if not nomination, this could be another one for Anthony Hopkins. Really, really well done.
Gwen! I said!
Dad, this is a plane. Mom's not here.
Stop looking at me. How was your trip out here, Daddy?
Who cares?
Now, I'll speak about the Falling, Falling, because it's very similar. It's Viggo Mortensen's directorial debut about caring for his dad, who also is kind of having dementia or going through dementia. I think it was a good effort, but it wasn't that great. It was just okay. I think part of the problem is it's because you could compare it to The Father very easily. And I think part of the challenge was, I think they needed just to push things a little further. I forget his name, unfortunately. I think it's Eric Henriksen, who played Viggo's dad. He did crotchety man really well. Like really, he did it. You hated him the first 10 minutes. And the sad part is that was it. You know, there was no redeeming factor to the character, which I think I would have just it's done the character a bit of a disservice, because he, again, without any redeeming factor, the fact that he's going through this, you don't feel for him as much, right? Because he's just so unlikable. So if I think they had tried to push and showing it a bit more of an emotion. I think they tried. I think that's the challenge. Is there were moments where you could see that was the intention, but I think part of that was his interaction with his granddaughter. I think they needed just to push it further, meaning he just needed to show a lot more doting, a lot more love, shall we say? Because without that, it's almost just disappear. I could really care less, right? Because no redeeming factor. And the last one was
Good Joe Bell.
I forget. Good Joe Bell. I didn't recall the story it was based off of, but in many respects, it's about Joe Bell walking across America, walking to New York, the city that his son wanted to move to, in tribute to his son who had committed suicide because he was bullied. Right. I think it was well done, but I think I would have liked the story of the son more. At least when they were showing their interactions, his story, a little bit of, showing a little bit of introduction of what he had to deal with. I thought that there was a lot more raw emotion around that. I think you'll walk away with some impactful scenes there. But on the whole, I think Mark Wahlberg actually did well. He did well for what he was given. I know there was a lot of controversy as well with Mark Wahlberg taking on this role, considering it was made by the folks who did Brokeback Mountain, and he had some commentary about Brokeback Mountain before. So I know there was a bit of controversy there, but I thought he did well. I just didn't think it just felt like a road trip, like a little road trip movie. But I thought, there was a lot more meat in the son story. But having said that, I thought it's decent enough film.
Yeah, this was the one that I wouldn't say I was excited about. It was one I was more curious about, because the fact that, as you said, it was written by the two writers of Brokeback Mountain, Larry McMurtry and Diana Ossana, made me sort of curious about how they would adapt this story. And then Mark Wahlberg, every movie sort of becomes the Mark Wahlberg show, and he isn't really great at showing subtle emotions. I wasn't too sure how that would all sort of come together. So this was the movie I included on my list, not that I was excited to see, but I was curious to see how it would turn out. Does Mark Wahlberg has it in him to turn in a truly magnificent performance? And do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, no, but I think he did well, considering it's Mark Wahlberg. I think that's one of the things.
Damning with faint praise.
The one thing that is telling, though, Gary Sinise is also in the movie. Very, very short scene, if not, maybe 5-10 minutes. And for those few minutes, he pretty much blew Mark Wahlberg out of the water. There was a lot more emotion for those short scenes that he had coming from Gary Sinise than Mark Wahlberg did for the entire movie. But as I said, he did well considering he's Mark Wahlberg.
That doesn't shock me completely. All right. John, I'm going to throw it over to you. There's no other movies that appeared on my preview, but is there some that either we should maybe be aware of, or do you think are going to make buzz, be a box office hit? What do you have on your list that you think we should be talking about still?
Sure. Yeah. So, I one thing I did that, I don't know, Maria, if you did as well. I mean, you're a seasoned TIFF veteran, but I selected a couple of Midnight Madness premieres. And so those kind of were really nice, just in giving me a taste of something completely different, right? These are movies I would never go out and see, otherwise. But I think, in that Midnight Madness context, were really were really enjoyable, right? So one I saw that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention was Shadow in the Cloud, and this is the one with Chloe Grace Moretz, and she, it's a totally wacky movie, just from start to finish, right? We open with this shot of her on a runway, and we have this electro synth music. It feels very Stranger Things-esque. It's very dark. It's very gritty. And then she gets onto this plane, and she's getting completely assaulted and berated by these misogynistic comments from these men. And then she goes in and has this whole exposition about what she's doing and why this is all important for her. And they just they dial it up to 11, and it's this total like action blockbuster that you'd expect to see in like a Fast and Furious movie. So I mean, it's all over the place, and plot wise, pretty weak. The visual effects were also pretty weak. The music was fantastic. The script, I think, had undergone a lot of rewrites due to some distancing that they were trying to do from Max Landis. I know he wrote the original script, and during the Me Too movement, they kind of chucked him off, and I think rightfully so. But it kind of left the script in what I would consider to be rough shape. But it was just a totally wild ride, and so I don't know if that will be picked up or hit theaters anytime soon. But if you're ever looking for something just totally wacky and out there, I would recommend that. But with that massive asterisk, right? Don't go into this expecting a well-written masterpiece. This is a wild film. And then another one that I think I would like to mention probably would be Under the Open Sky. And this was a film about an ex-Yakuza member who basically gets released from being in prison for, I think, 13 years or so, and is trying to kind of become part of society and kind of find himself, and also just become more comfortable with kind of the world as it's changed over the course of 13 years. And I mean, the acting was fine, but I think what I really liked about it was just a beautiful movie. I mean, every single shot was very well framed. The coloring was beautiful, and it was telling. I mean, it was telling a pretty pretty typical story. I mean, a story we've seen told before, but I think just the way they did it, it felt very artistic, and it made my viewing of it very enjoyable. You could see where it was going basically after the first 15 minutes, but there were still aspects of it that would make you chuckle or make you cry. And I think, when a film does that, it's always worth checking out. And so, also, this might be a fair time to mention a couple of, I would say, half of these movies that I saw were in a foreign language. So there was a lot of reading going on. And this, which is fine. I enjoy seeing foreign language films, and I think there's a lot of really great ones out there. And I think this is one that is very worthwhile. If you're not trying to watch movies that aren't in English or aren't in your native language, because of that reason, I think this is one where you should put that aside and watch it, because there isn't too much dialogue, and it's not that hard to keep up. It's very easy on the eyes to just watch and just enjoy this movie. I mean, you could watch this movie basically on mute and just enjoy it for how beautifully it's shot.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome to hear. All right, well, I think we're going to kind of start to wrap things up a little bit. They came out with the awards. We are recording on September 20th, which is the day they announced all the awards. And the People's Choice, which is basically the front runner for who is going to be at least nominated for the Oscars, if not win Best Picture. We've got the winner being Nomadland, the runner-up being One Night in Miami, and then the third place being Beans. Unfortunately, neither of you were able to see Beans, so you can't comment on that. But I'd love to get your takes. Are you happy with the fact that Nomadland is the winner? If not, what would you have chosen? John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I'm very happy with Nomadland winning, and also being now a front runner for certainly a Best Picture nomination. And I think probably going to be a director nomination for Chloe Zhao. This, it was, like, as we discussed earlier, it was a movie that did an excellent job of telling the story of a woman, and her journey across America, over this year during troubling economic times. And, it was beautifully shot. The score was phenomenal. As I mentioned earlier, the landscape shots were completely stunning. And so I think this will definitely will definitely do well come award seasons, and I hope it gets the nominations it deserves. I think Frances McDormand definitely deserves a Best Actress nomination for this film.
Interesting. So out of all the movies you've seen, would you have picked Nomadland to be your People's Choice nominee or winner?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely the crowd favorite. A personal, I probably would have picked Another Round as my choice. But I definitely think this has more commercial appeal for the general audience.
Interesting. What about you, Maria? What are your thoughts on this?
I think as the winner, I'm not surprised. It is a great film. And I think to John's point, it is going to do well in the Oscars. I think it's going to do well for Best Director, Best Actress, considering, Frances McDormand really kind of anchored this film. She did a great job. And Best Picture. So no surprise there. I think it's well deserved. However, I was hoping for Another Round. Again, because it's just so unique, and it really was. It did well. And, the story is unique, but it still got its point across without being too preachy. And the father is also there. Like if that kind of came out, as the father was well done. Also one of my top 3. But yeah, I think it's well deserved. It'll do well. The other thing I think it's just an opportunity to comment as well is because of the streaming platform. I wonder if this had happened through TIFF, because before tweets would have gone out the minute the movie was over screening. Just and then the word will go out. No, this movie's great. A lot more people will try and get the film, and then just the buzz would kind of push some movies forward. Considering it was streaming, a lot of things were diffused, right? Like somebody will watch it at 6, send out a tweet then. Somebody will watch it at 9 tomorrow morning, and then they'll have the same comment. So I wonder if some other films like Another Round and The Father just lost a lot of that momentum because they didn't have the mass population just kind of pushing it out there. Nomadland did well. I think it got a lot of word of mouth with the other festivals, and I wonder if it took that momentum over to TIFF as well. But it's a great film. I'm not going to take anything away from it. I'm just wondering if things would have been different if we were under, normal circumstances, with air quotes.
I feel like we need to briefly talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Ammonite. I know tickets were super limited. That was the big buzzy movie going into it because it basically seems like it's an English language adaptation of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, where it sounds like it's almost plot for plot the exact same film, just with Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan as the leads. Did either of you hear anything about this? Do you have any thoughts about the reactions to this? Because it's been pretty muted and I would say extremely underwhelming.
Yeah, I would say from everything I've heard, underwhelming is a pretty good way to describe it. I mean, this was the number one on my list because for me, Portrait of a Lady on Fire was my favorite film of 2019. It blew me away when I saw it, and I had no qualms with it being in French. I thought that added to the beauty of it. So seeing an English adaptation, I was very excited. I think Kate Winslet probably delivers an excellent performance, but I can't speak to that, so I will have to wait and say. And one thing I will just add, Maria, that I found pretty interesting, Nomadland has a really beautiful score. I picked up on this while watching. It's almost entirely piano throughout the film. I mean, there's very, very little kind of lyrics in any of the music, and it's all piano. And the same composer who scored Nomadland also scored The Father. So I wonder if that might, you might have a type, Maria.
You never know, right? So about Ammonite, ironically, and again, to your point, I guess, Dakota, it when I read the summary, it did sound very much like Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And I saw that. And unfortunately, I didn't get it. There was a lot of people, there was a lot of buzz about it, and I walked away going, it's good, but I don't see why it's great. So I think part of that is once I saw that it was very similar, I pretty much kind of said, been there, done that, right?
Interesting.
And I think the challenge with Ammonite, and that's why it may not have gone further, because they limited the screening, right? And by the time that regular TIFF goers were purchasing tickets, none were available. Where are we going to get word of mouth, right? Where, regular film goers didn't get the chance to see that. And in some respects, Bruised. For all we know, Bruised might have been great. I don't know, right?
Yeah, that was one where I kind of put it in the category of good Joe Bell. I know Halle Berry's kind of had a bit of a spotty track record post Monsters Ball, and I was like, well, this could either be a surprising, front runner for the Oscars, or this could be a complete mess because it's Halle Berry and we don't really know what to expect. And so I didn't quite make it. It was my honorable mentions. And so I'm definitely interested to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if with both Ammonite and Bruise that it sort of bit themselves in the butt by the studios refusing to allow greater access to it, because we're in this time where, frankly, there could be unlimited digital screenings. We are not bound by seats. We are not bound by cars at the drive-in. They could do unlimited. Obviously, you don't want that because then piracy issues or whatever might be a bigger concern. But I don't know. I haven't heard a good enough answer as to why they were limiting these digital screens to the extent that they were.
Yeah, and even more, ironic is Bruised, if I'm not mistaken, was bought by Netflix. Right? So, it could be that, but they would stream it anyway. Yep. So anybody who has a Netflix account would get to watch it. Mm-hmm. So why limit it? Otherwise, you'll get a lot of momentum going out before it got the Netflix deal. But that's just a bit of a sore point.
Yeah, because there's people like you and me, where we're going to festivals and we're trying to see things. We're not exactly the same customer as you fire up Netflix and be like, oh, what's the newest release? Oh, a Halle Berry movie. Great, I'll throw that on. It's completely different audiences.
Yeah.
And I will say the Bruise, I think, will probably do pretty well on Netflix. I looking at the trailer and seeing that type of movie, it does look like, of all the films that premiered at the festival, it seems like it has the most mainstream appeal. Big name. I think it would have been certainly a big red carpet event, had they done the in-person screening of it. But it is very upsetting, I would say, that we were limited to these screens. I know. I will say, One Night in Miami, I think, was picked up by Amazon, so that should be available for streaming, worldwide within a month or two. So the people who want to see that get that luxury.
I think in another year, I would have been extremely disappointed by the fact that theaters aren't really open and allowing big audiences. That's probably the best hope that the movie has for getting a wide audiences. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, the last question I have is, as far as looking forward to the Oscars, what sort of movies? I know you both just talked about Nomadland and Frances McDormand clearly being a front runner and the movie itself being a front runner for director and picture. What other movies that you saw do you think are going to be front runners for the big categories, whether it's best picture, best leading actor, actress, supporting actor, actress? What sort of stuff do we need to sort of keep our eye on? Maria, we'll start with you.
Oh my goodness. Are we talking just the festival or just in general?
The movies that you saw at this festival, what do you think? Just because TIFF as nature usually is a great precursor for what we can expect for award season.
No, fair point. So Nomadland, hands down, I think we know it's going to do well. I'll echo The Father as well. I think it will do well in the acting category. It might get both. Anthony Hopkins is almost a shoo-in for that. I wonder if Olivia Colman might get nominated for Best Actress.
Lead actress or supporting?
Might be supporting. Okay. I think it'd be a supporting role. I may need to think on that one. I wonder if One Night in Miami might get some mention, right? If not,
is it more of an ensemble piece?
It is an ensemble piece. I think that's the challenge. Acting-wise, I think they'll cancel each other out, but maybe screenplay might do well on screenplay. That's pretty tight as far as the conversations or discussions that they had. But beyond, I wonder if another round becomes Denmark's film for international. I guess it's called it. Is it still called international?
It's international film now. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They might pick that, and I think it would do well. I can't think of any other international film. Although from New Order, I just want to mention that New Order, I think, is from Mexico, and that was actually quite interesting. It if you have the opportunity, you might need to pick that one up. It's about pretty much it's a class issue. It's where the lower class seems to have revolted against the rich people. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really interesting concepts. I don't know if Mexico picks that. It could be a bit of a, again, I'll say it again, dark horse. But yeah, beyond that, I think I need to kind of mull it over what else from what I've seen that really kind of left an impression.
Mm-hmm. Now I know you're clearly a big fan of Another Round, with Thomas Vinterberg previously getting The Hunt in the what was then called Best Foreign Language Film nominee. I would assume that they're probably going to be close to a lock for Denmark's submission, and probably close to a lock for actually getting the nomination itself. But as far as the actual performance goes, does Mads Mikkelsen sort of lead the film enough? Do you think that he's going to be a player in the Best Actor film? I know we can look at something like Parasite last year, where despite it winning Best Picture, didn't pick up any acting nominations because it's more of an ensemble film and there are more unknowns, whereas Mads Mikkelsen is much more of a known quantity in North America.
I would say, unfortunately, I think he'll be overlooked. Right? Yeah. Just knowing how the Oscars work. Mm-hmm. You know, in many respects, it's not usually the best that really win or even get nominated. It's more of its popularity, right? Yeah. And while he is, you know, while American audiences may know him because of his work in TV and as playing Hannibal, I don't think they'll. Number one, I don't even know if they'll even watch the film because it is subtitled. I mean, that's an unfortunate part. Parasite just seems to be the aberration of the international films. Well, there's a few others, but that hasn't been a lot, shall we say. So I honestly think he's going to get overlooked.
Interesting. Okay. And John, what about you? What do you think are sort of ones we should keep our eyes on?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting this year, right? Because we have such a small number. I mean, you can see it at TIFF. You know, usually we have 300 plus films, and this year it was 70. So I think the selection is going to be a lot smaller than it would be in normal years. So I think there is a higher likelihood that, you know, someone like Mads could get that Best Actor nomination, but I don't see it likely. I think more likely, you know, due to the nature of the Academy Awards. And it being a popularity contest, I could see Naomi Watts getting a Best Actress nomination for her role in Penguin Bloom. That was a film I saw, didn't stand out, but she did deliver a pretty top-notch performance, and it was definitely not an ensemble piece. It was pretty much her front and center for the entire film. I think Nomadland definitely could be a shoo-in for a Best Director nom. I think it also could get Best Original Score, that nomination as well. I mean, I talk about it a lot because I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I think other than echoing everything Maria said, I would say that pretty much covers it. I mean, Regina King maybe for One Night. I think One Night could be a shoo-in for a lot of awards, a lot of nominations, just because I think it will be so widely seen, right? You know, Amazon picking it up, everyone's going to be seeing this come award season. And so I think there'll be a lot of buzz around it. I think it's very prevalent this year, and I think the Academy will recognize that. So yeah, they could certainly give Regina King. And I don't know, I don't think it would probably get Best Adapted Screenplay, since it is based on a stage play.
What about
but
Leslie Odom Jr., who is probably the most well-known cast member, especially due to his popularity in Hamilton? Do you think he might be a contender for supporting actor?
Yeah, no, certainly.
Interesting.
I think of the lot of the four of them, and aside from being the most recognized one, I think he's the one that delivered the character the best, shall we say. Because, so I would, while it's an ensemble piece, I think he was the one that's a standout.
Now, he plays Sam Cooke in the film. Do we get to hear him sing as Sam Cooke?
I don't think so. I don't remember any singing.
No? Oh, wow. That's almost disappointing.
Am I wrong?
No, he sang in the end.
But not as Sam Cooke.
Oh, yes, that's Sam Cooke.
He does? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, he sings Change is Going to Come. I think that was part of, the arc of the character, right? Because he did a lot of fluffy kind of, love songs. Mm-hmm. And then, the whole concept is Malcolm trying to push him and saying, you need to create an impact. And he kind of points to Bob Dylan saying, why is this man speaking our cause? Mm-hmm. It needs to be us. And that's how we kind of see the arc of Leslie, or at least that's how they kind of interpreted it, by starting to sing at the end about change is going to come.
Well, that makes me very excited because he has a fantastic voice, and I'm a huge Sam Cooke fan. Well,
yes, certainly.
Awesome. I think that was absolutely terrific. The two of you imbued so much knowledge. I'm so excited to see all these films. Maria, you are the TIFF veteran. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and all of the different films that you saw.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think this is an opportunity really to chat about films that we lost, because before I would chat with people while you're waiting outside of the Ryerson, right? So what did you see? What did you think? Not having that opportunity, thank you very much for giving me this chance.
It was my pleasure. John, and you being the newbie and never doing a festival like this before, it was awesome to sort of hear your experience and see how much you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, having a discussion like this with you, Dakota, and Maria has been fantastic, and is something I think I would have really enjoyed doing in person. And so it just makes me excited for the opportunity, hopefully next year, but probably in 2 years to do it again, but in Toronto.
Film is meant to be discussed, and maybe next year outside the light box, we can all talk about what we've been seeing. Awesome. Thank you so much, John and Maria. It's been a real pleasure.
Great. Thank you, Dakota.
Hey, Bert.
Hey, Linda.
Come over and join us.
No, I'm just going to take a little walk.
Okay.
Be back soon.
Once again, I do want to thank both John and Maria for coming on the show. They were very knowledgeable, very intelligent, very articulate, and I just think this was a fantastic episode. I learned so much, and I'm even more excited for the different movies that came out, especially for seeing Nomadland with it being the People's Choice winner. That about wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I want to thank Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. Thank you to Aesthetic Magazine for presenting the show. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ContraZoomPod. And please check out ContraZoomPod.com for all your CZP needs, and bookmark it because there's going to be tons of cool stuff there in the future. The show notes are going to be up there with links for all the different movies that we saw, that we talked about on this episode. And if you could also please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts, especially on iTunes. It really helps us grow and find new listeners. And if you do, send me a screenshot to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com, and I'll send you some free swag. Because I'm making some cool stuff and I want to share it with everyone, but first with the loyal listeners who are helping to spread the show. So once again, thank you to John and Maria for coming on, and thank you for listening.